Hi guys, in this video we're going to be looking at a mock test from Ashfield Driving Test Centre. So we're starting this video on the driveway coming out of the test centre. You'll notice it's quite wet, so you want to be aware of how to use the wipers and lights on your vehicle when you're going for your test. And as I always say, when you're coming out of this driveway, keep the car nice and straight, get yourself all the way up to the giveaway lines, and then make a decision whether you can go or not from there. What you don't want to be doing is leaning across those lines on either side or sitting too far back, because the signs on the right are going to make it difficult to see out of that junction. As we come up to the traffic lights, you'll see the 50-mile-an-hour sign on the left there and the pupil lining up on the left-hand lane. Now this is a normal position you'd be in to go straight ahead. You'll notice the arrow says the right lane can go straight as well. So be mindful as you go across these junctions that the right hand side may come with you, and these lanes may merge as you go across the junction too. So you want to be aware of who's with you and if they're potentially going to try and overtake you. We're going to turn left, and as you remember, this is a 50-mile-an-hour zone, so what the examiners want to see is you picking up that speed nice and swiftly if it's safe to do so. Now of course, with the wet weather, you can afford to be a little bit more gentle with the acceleration and steering, and that's going to help you keep better control of the car, because of course in the wet there is more chance of the car slipping if you put too much of a change into those tires, such as too much acceleration, too much braking, or sharp steering. So you want to keep everything nice and smooth. Don't forget to check your mirrors frequently as you go along, particularly when you're going along roads like this. It's easy to forget about, so regular mirror check is going to keep you up to date on what's going on behind you. That includes checking your door mirrors frequently too. As we come up to the traffic lights, I've asked the pupil to take a right turn, so you can see him lining up in the right hand lane as we come up to these lights. Ideally, you want to be checking your mirrors and signaling before you get into that filter lane, so everyone knows exactly where you're intending to put yourself. It's no good putting your signals on after you've taken up that position, because then people already know what you're up to. So mirrors and signal, then position and speed on the approach to every junction. When you are sat at traffic lights for a while, don't forget to keep your eyes moving. Don't just stare at the traffic light or the car in front and wait for them to change. Keep your eyes moving for anything that could affect you when those lights change. So there could be blue light vehicles approaching from any direction, particularly behind, or cyclists and motorbikes even filtering through the traffic behind you. If you can spot them early, you can plan for them and you can keep yourself safe. And that awareness is really, really key on your driving test, because the examiners are going to be watching out for how aware you are of your surroundings. If you're demonstrating good awareness on your test, then any mistakes you make are going to be viewed as less severe by the examiner. Now you'll notice with these traffic lights, the traffic going straight ahead has its own filter light. We have a separate filter light which will allow us to turn right. When our light goes green and we see those green arrows, it means the oncoming traffic should be held on red for us to cross. So we can make way over nice and confidently. Remember to check out things like the van on the left there who's coming into the filter. Now this one is traffic light controlled, however not all of them will be, so that van could be making his way up to the giveaway line and ready to go. We've just entered a 30 zone in case you missed it as well. Now you notice the pupil keeping his speed at around 25 mile an hour. I think that's pretty reasonable given the conditions that we're in. And the examiners will judge this pretty fairly as well. The examiners will take into account any weather conditions, visibility, and the busyness of any roads as well. And they'll judge your speed based on that. If your speed is reasonable for those conditions, then it won't pick you up a fault. However, if you're going too slowly or too quickly, it's potentially going to give you a fault. So make sure your speed matches the environment. Up ahead, we're going to be turning left at the traffic lights, and one of the common things people do wrong here is mistime the signals. They'll either signal too soon, and that creates the impression they're going to turn into the car park. This could escalate into a serious fault if someone's waiting to come out of the car park, or a dangerous fault if they actually try to pull out in front of you because your signal leads them to believe that you're turning in. The other thing is not signaling until you actually get to the traffic lights, which is what this pupil did. He got all the way into that filter lane before he's put the signal on. And that means people behind don't know what his intentions are until he's already doing it, which means the signal becomes pretty useless at that point. Because it doesn't cause any real risk, it's only a driver fault. Just be mindful that your signals should give people advance warning of what you intend to do. Taking the next road on the left here, you want to be on the mirrors and signal before you come in and looking up into that road. Notice the parked cars on the right and the van there. So the pupil did a really good job spotting that nice and early and lowering his speed before entering the turn. That kept him nice and safe, and that level of awareness is exactly what the examiners want to see on a driving test. That kind of awareness is also going to keep you safe after your driving test, and that's the important thing that you want to focus on. It's not just about passing your test, it's looking after yourself after you've passed. Taking the road on the right here, you can see how slowly the pupil approaches. That allows him to see into the road before bringing the nose of the car in. Again, demonstrating really good planning and awareness. Now, if you try and turn in before you've looked up and something's coming the other way, that's going to cause you a problem. It could very quickly escalate into a dangerous fault if it's too late for the other car to respond, or it has to have a heavy response to what you do. So always look into those new roads before you turn in. Make sure you've got a clear path and then bring the nose of the car in. Don't cut corners and don't rush into those side roads. The same applies when you're coming out of side roads. Make sure you can see before you cross the giveaway line, because crossing that giveaway line without a clear view and a certainty that it's safe is going to cause you problems. And that is the most common reason that people fail the driving test, and has been for a long time. So as you come up to the end of a road, you'll see this pupil slowing down, making sure he can see both directions before pulling the nose of the car over the giveaway line. And that's an absolutely brilliant example of how to deal with closed junctions like this, where the view is quite poor. Up ahead, we're taking another tight right turn, and again the view is really poor, so you'll see the pupil slowing down, making sure he can look up into that new road before he turns in. That allows him time to stop if there's an oncoming car before entering the new road. I'm going to get the pupil to pull up on the left here to do an angle start, which is where you pull up in front of a parked car. The examiners will specifically point out a car and tell you to be within a car length of it, and then ask you to move out again. I'm going to record a driver fault for moving off safely on this occasion, and that's because the pupil didn't check his right shoulder before moving out. You need to make sure you're looking fully around over that right shoulder, the blind spot, before you pull out around the car. Also be mindful of the oncoming cars, if there are any, because if you pull out into the path of an oncoming car, that is going to be a serious or dangerous fault, and of course that would be a fail on your driving test. Pulling up next to this grey Peugeot, I've asked the pupil to do a parallel park. Now, when you're pulling up like this, you've got to show good awareness of what's behind you. The pupil spotted the car behind in the mirrors, put his signal on, and allowed plenty of room for him to pass, so no fault for that. Before reversing, the examiners want to see a full 360-degree look around the car. You've got to look over both shoulders, out all the windows, all the mirrors, and make sure you're entirely safe before you start moving. When you're doing your maneuvers, take your time and continually check around the car. If you do misjudge the angles and you have to correct it, it's not going to fail you unless you leave the car in a bad position or it demonstrates that you can't control the car properly. This pupil did a fantastic job, perfect parallel park in one go with perfect observations as well, so absolutely no faults on that maneuver. When it comes to moving off, just like the angle start, check that right shoulder, check the road ahead, and make sure you're completely safe before you start moving around that car. Take your time and don't rush to get going. Now, what I recommend is take a few seconds just to collect your thoughts before moving off, because you can't pick up a fault while you're sat still. But you will pick up faults if you move off and your mind is still racing and worrying about other things that have already happened. Anything that you've done that you think you've made mistakes with, leave it behind you. Take that few seconds before you move off to allow yourself to clear your mind, then move on. At the end, we're going to take a left turn, and this one is quite a closed junction. Notice the cars on the opposite side too. So what you have to do is be aware of the cars from the left as well, because coming out of a road like this, your nose is going to stick out and potentially cause them a problem. Now, when the pupil pulls out, you'll notice the white car coming from our left reacts by slowing down and letting the learner finish his turn. Now, whilst there was enough space for the cars to pass, it did make it very tight and very awkward. So I am going to record a serious fault due to the other car reacting to that and it being a reasonable reaction, even though they could have got through. So any junctions like that, make sure both sides are clear and that you've got plenty of room before you pull out. Up ahead, we've got a set of traffic lights where I'm going to ask the pupil to take a right turn. Now, at this right turn, the oncoming cars go at the same time and there's no filter light on our side of the junction. You'll notice also there's no lights on the far side of the junction, so we've got to be very mindful about how we enter crossroads like this. My advice is never be the third car in the junction. You want to be car number 1 or car number 2, because car number 3 is going to find it very difficult to clear the junction safely before all the lights change over and the cars from the side start moving. Now, the Land Rover in front is the third car in the queue, and you can see how he's awkwardly positioned in the lights on the crossing rather than being forward and in the junction. That is a really bad place to be. So when my pupil moves up here and the lights start changing, this demonstrates poor planning in terms of dealing with the junction. See, the van and the Land Rover should be the ones to go. Notice the lights on the sides have already turned green as he turns. Now, I'm going to record that as a fault for planning and awareness, because I feel like that could have been planned better and that the learner relied on the van and the Jeep in front to be able to clear the junction so he could. If either of them hesitated, my learner would have been stuck in the middle of that junction as the crossing traffic started moving. Traveling down this road, we've got a 50-mile-an-hour limit, and you want to make sure that as the lanes open out, you're keeping an eye on those mirrors so you know who's going to be overtaking you. And this way, if you do need to change position, you're already prepared for it by knowing what's around you. The pupil will need to move right because we are going to be turning right up ahead. So before doing that, check your mirrors, make sure your signal's on, check your mirrors again for how other cars are reacting, and then move over gently. Don't rush to change position when you hear the direction that you're turning right. As we approach the next right turn, you'll see the pupil moving over nice and gently into the filter lane. Remember, your mirrors and signal need to be checked before you make that move. And of course, looking ahead, you can see the red light and how we've slowed down nice and early, just keeping a good following space behind the car that's in front. As we're waiting at the lights, remember, keep your eyes moving and watch out for anything that might affect you when your lights change, such as other vehicles, blue light vehicles, cyclists, motorbikes, anything that might cause you to not be able to carry on. Notice the cyclist over the far side of the junction, for example. Now, the filter lane on the other side of the junction where the cyclist is also a giveaway, so you want to be mindful of cars that are coming down there and may want to chance it to get in front of you. So just keep an eye on those, make sure they are slowing down. Be confident to keep moving, but be aware that they may not respond appropriately and you may need to respond to them. Now, part of that includes checking your mirrors so you know what's behind you and how your changes are going to affect that following traffic. Coming down this road here, we've got a few parked cars. You notice the pupil's carrying a lowered speed. What you can't see on the camera, of course, is the mirror use. He's checking the left side as he's passing by to make sure his space is good, and the right side, of course, to make sure nothing's coming up behind that could cause him a problem. And again, as we see the car ahead parked up, right mirror check before you move out around it, left mirror check as you're coming by, just to keep an eye on the clearance. And that's going to help you keep more in tune with the size of your car and the space you're using, and feel more confident about getting through those gaps. It's also going to show the examiner good awareness, and that's going to go in your favor if you do make any mistakes further down the line. Up ahead, we've got a roundabout where we'll be going straight ahead. Because it's a single lane roundabout, we don't need to position the car in any particular way. We've just got to drive through nice and smoothly. The pupil does a really nice job there, not forgetting the left mirror check and the signal to leave the roundabout. Now, doing that can seem a little bit redundant at times. However, it could help oncoming cars decide what to do. If they see you signaling to leave the roundabout, they can make a decision to go. Or if they see you signaling, not signaling, they may not know what you're doing and they may slow down and wait. If they do that and they don't need to, that's going to go against you on your test. So your signals have to be clear to other drivers. That's the whole point of them. Tell people what you're up to. And of course, the mirror use, so you know who's around you when you make those changes too. Up ahead, we have a roundabout, and you'll see the sign on the left there, bear left for Huthwaite and right towards Sutton Town Centre. Now, we're going to be taking the right to Sutton Town Centre. You can use either lane for this roundabout, so ideally, I'd say the left side. Now, the pupil's going to take up the right-hand lane. Whichever lane you choose here, you want to make sure that you are sticking at your position. Notice how the car on the left there carried on round to the right. If you end up changing lane like this pupil does, then that could be a serious fault or a dangerous fault if someone's nearby. Because he made good mirror use and he signaled before doing that, I'm only going to record a driver fault because I felt the lane change was unnecessary and it could have presented a risk to cars around. Now, like I said earlier, that awareness is really important in reducing any faults that get recorded against you. Had he not looked in the mirrors, that would definitely be a serious fault because he's changed position without making sure it's safe first. Speaking of mirrors, notice how the lanes merge as we come across those lights. You want to be on those mirrors for cars like the Mini that could overtake you and then move in front of you. So lots and lots of mirror use as you're moving around, particularly where there's places people can pass you. Up ahead, we have a set of lights, which is a pedestrian crossing. Then we have a roundabout where the pupil is going to be turning right, third exit. You want to make sure that you check your mirrors and signal in good time for this turn, and you line up in that right-hand lane. As you come around the roundabout, count the exits. If it helps, that one in front does count. Left mirror, left signal, and watch for the crossing as you're leaving. It's very easy to get caught out by those lights because sometimes you can be so focused on checking the mirrors and making sure you're safe to leave the roundabout that you forget to look ahead at what you're actually going into. So be very mindful of the road ahead as well, because that, of course, is where you put in the car. And if you put the car somewhere that it shouldn't be, that is going to be a problem for you. Notice the car on the left here waiting on the double yellows. If there's not enough room, just hold back like this pupil did, keep the mirrors covered, and then when it's safe, make your way around the car nice and safely. Just be mindful that doors may open, so give them plenty of room like this pupil did. Pulling up on the left here, and the pupil's picked a really nice spot between two driveways and he's brought the car in nice and close to the curb. So that is absolutely perfect. That's what the examiners want to see on the test. And then, of course, when you move off again, don't forget that right blind spot. Now, just like earlier on, that can be recorded as a driver fault if you miss it. And if you keep missing it, it's going to become a serious habitual fault. Turning left here, just be mindful of this give way at the end. So it's a double left turn and it's very, very tight. So you can see how slowly the pupil did this one. And at the bottom here, another tight right turn. Be very mindful that the view to the right is quite poor. If you come in too quickly and your examiner has to intervene and stop you, like I did here, then it's going to go down as a dangerous fault. You want to get up to that giveaway line and make sure you can cross safely before crossing the line. Don't rush yourself through it. As I mentioned earlier, that is the most common reason that people fail the driving test. So just like this junction here, the view to the right is quite poor. Get close to those giveaway lines before you decide. And if you need to, you can always pause and take an extra glance. The examiners will understand that if the view is poor, you're going to take your time through that junction. So don't feel you've got to hurry out into that new road in order to get yourself through the test safely. You've got to make sure that the road is clear before you cross the giveaway line. Up ahead at the roundabout, we're going to be turning left first exit. The pupil does a really nice job here, checking his mirrors, signalling in good time, and making sure it's safe before entering the new road. As we come round, there is a bend to the right, and you want to be really careful to align the car correctly here. The pupil leans in a little bit too early and then has to correct himself because of the oncoming car. That's going to go down as a driver fault because I didn't feel it presented enough of a risk to really go down as a serious fault, but it was enough of a noticeable change to go down as a driver fault. So just be mindful that when you come around corners, you're not leaning in too soon, that you're keeping completely to your side. And that's particularly difficult when the lane markings are quite poor on that junction, for example, on that bend. The markings are really, really poor, so it's understandable that pupils started leaning in a little soon. We don't want to be doing that, of course. We want to keep to our side of the road. At the end of this road, there is a set of traffic lights, and you'll need the left lane for left and the right lane for right. If you are turning right, the examiners are pretty good at telling you nice and early, so you can get in line nice and early. Coming up to those lights, notice the filter light allowing you to turn left. Just be mindful of the crossing on the left as well. It's quite a tight angle as you come around there, so nice low speed, which you can see the pupil did really nicely there. And that brings us into Sutton-in-Ashfield High Street. Anytime you're going down a high street, make sure your speed is low and you're looking around for pedestrians because people will cross the road in strange places. There's a few particular points here where there's speed ramps and sort of paving across them. They are not crossings as such, but they're places where people may assume they can cross without having to wait for traffic. So just be mindful of people waiting to cross there and misunderstanding what that actually is, that it's not a crossing, it's just a speed ramp with a crossing point where they can see the road safely to make a better decision. Mini roundabout is the pupil giving way nicely to the silver van before making his way over to the second exit. Now, I would suggest signalling for that one because it is a clear left or right at the roundabout. There is no straight ahead, and that's the same from all angles on that particular roundabout. Coming down the road here, again, there's quite large shops, parked cars, and some pedestrians moving around. So again, just keep those eyes moving, looking out for people who may want to cross the road in strange places like between cars or just randomly in front of shops. The worst thing I've seen on these is people walking straight out of a shop and straight into the road. And that's particularly risky where you've got a zebra crossing here where someone could step out of a shop and onto that crossing within a moment. So just keep your eyes moving for any potential problems like that. And again, pair that with plenty of mirror use so you know what's going on behind you constantly. Up ahead, we have a set of traffic lights where we're going to be bearing right. Now, there's no left turn at this one. There is a bare left, a bare right, and a right turn. We're going to be bearing right. So for this one, I would not signal. I would check the mirrors, however, and then lean right into the turn. You'll see the green truck ahead has just went down the road we're going to go to. So again, as we're sat in queues of traffic, keep an eye on those mirrors frequently. Keep your mind on the lights and the traffic ahead, of course, but keep scanning around for anything that could cause you a problem. Cyclists in particular who could sneak up behind you. You want to be aware of them before you move away. And don't move away if there's one passing you. Just up ahead, we're going to be taking a right turn, and there is a filter box for this one. There's also a filter box for the road on the left for the oncoming cars. See the blue car moving into it now. So you want to make sure that you move into the second half of that box. See the two white lines and the arrow guiding you in. You move into the first half of that box, you're technically in the oncoming lane, and that could cause you a problem, particularly if someone coming the other way is looking to use that. As we make the turn, looking up into that new road, don't forget a mirror check to see if anyone's following you, and just building your speed nice and smoothly based on the road conditions. You can see we've got a few side roads, parked cars around, and bends, so the pupil's keeping the speed quite low there in the low 20s just to account for that. Looking ahead, again, there's more parked cars making the road narrower, and there's a bend after some of these cars too, so we want to be really careful not to lean around those parked cars till we're sure that it's safe. If the road bends away, that can make it harder to see, so we account for that with a lowered speed. We're now entering a school zone as well, and you can see the lights flashing there advising us of 20. Now, that's not a legal limit because it's not in a red circle, but the advice is there, and the lights are flashing telling you should watch out because it's school time. Being 2:30, we're probably not going to encounter too many school kids, but you are going to get the parents arriving to park the cars ready to pick the kids up, the ones who want to get a nice space close to the gates. So keep your eyes moving and your mirrors covered for any vehicles moved around and potentially even kids coming out early, even though it may not be the main letting out time for them. Up at the traffic lights, we're going straight ahead. So just like at the start of the test, you've got two lanes which go straight ahead. You can use either of them. My advice would be to use the left-hand lane. However, we're going to be turning right just after the traffic light into the test centre, so it's understandable that the pupils line up on the right here. Whichever lane you use, make sure you're checking the other lane as you make your way across, because these do merge on the other side as well, and you want to be watching out for cars who may cause you a problem as you go across the junction. Coming up to the driveway, we've got to make sure we go into our side of the road, so make sure you get as close in to the left side of the driveway as you can, avoiding the outcoming traffic like this blue car here. That actually helps the pupil line up nicely for this turn, and that brings us back into the test centre. So I hope this video has been useful in preparing for your own test. If you found it useful, please like, share and subscribe and comment, and I'll keep these videos coming. Thank you for watching again, and God bless.